So today I'm going to turn a bowl, not using a chuck at all, using face plates and screw chucks. This is a piece of laburnum that I have put on the pillar drill after I've roughly shaped it, and drilled a small recess where I can put the little face plate with a screw chuck on and attach a couple of screws to it. You need to do that in order to get rid of the bark and make sure you've got a nice solid platform. You can do it with a chisel if you haven't got a forceps bit. I'm doing it this way because this is going to be a natural edged bowl. So as you look at it, on the right will be the inside. So the first thing I'm going to do is roughly shape the outside, which is on the left as you look at it. The screw chuck is one that came with an old CL3 lathe that I've got, and I've got an adapter, as you can see, on the lathe to convert it from my M33 to the 3/4 inch 16. Quite useful. I've got a few of these with the old lathe, and they're slightly different sizes and shapes, but I've used a few of them today. There's a fair bit of wood to come off the edges and the sides because it was only roughly cut on the bandsaw. So I just get stuck in with the bowl gouge and rub the bevel where I can and come around the corner. The wood's really hard, it's probably 10 years or 15 years old. So after the initial push cuts from the outside towards the base, just to get a bit of a profile and get rid of some of the unwanted material, I'm now going to trim the bottom a bit more with some pull cuts and then continue to refine the shape. It's all about a series of push and pull cuts to get rid of the material. The pull cut's quite effective. You're properly cutting rather than scraping because you've got the bevel rubbing, and you're using those long wings. Quite effective way of reducing the material. You've got to watch your hands too because you've got those flying wings with the natural edge. So it's just a question of just removing the material as quickly as you can. As I say, this is rock hard. The best finish I think he's got with a push cut from the outside, so you're compressing the fibres. Got to watch it with those wings though, because it's hit and miss on the first part. It's just a question of going round and trying to get a profile that is pleasing. Obviously speed it up here. Just got a bit of a reverse OG shape on it, and then needed to true up the bottom to make sure it was completely flat, because there's going to be a glue block stuck onto this, so this needs to be as smooth and as flat as is possible. A quick sand up using the electric drill on the Simon Hope 50mm arbor system. Go through the grades and get a decent finish. I've got a bit of cracking, so I'm going to have to do a bit of treatment on that in a second. So I finished the first lot of sanding and then put some chestnut sanding sealer on because I want to get some super glue into the cracks, and if you put the sealer on first, then you won't get so much nasty staining as the glue seeps into the wood. So to fill the cracks, using some thin super glue and pouring that into the cracks, and then sprinkling some sawdust salvaged from the sanding process. Rub that in with a palette knife. When you've managed to push it in, you can then do some sanding whilst the super glue is still wet. You have to be careful to not super glue your finger to the sandpaper, of course, but if you do that carefully, then the fine dust generated from the sanding will help fill the crack. A bit more super glue, rinse and repeat. After that is all sanded up, I'm just putting 3 little grooves in the bottom using my point tool, which has got very sharp sides and produces a really good clean groove. A quick sand up and ready then to put the glue block on. This is a scrap piece that's been used before as a jam chuck. It's got a hole in the middle, which is great because I need to mount this on a screw chuck in a minute. So I'm going to centre this up using the hole in the cone drive, and then it will be glued to the bottom of the piece. So now I'm happy that it's all going to go on straight and true. I'm putting a little bit of newspaper in between the two pieces and then glue it all up. The glue should go right through the newspaper and form an effective bond, but it just helps remove it later on when we're finished. So I've now used some fast acting PVA glue on both sides of the paper, plenty of it, squished it all up with the tailstock pressure so that it will hopefully bond well. Now here is where I got impatient. I left it to glue for 45 minutes or an hour, which was clearly not long enough, as you will see, because it all needed to be re-glued up again after the next stage. Hey ho. So I wanted to mount the waste block onto the next screw chuck. So I've just taken off the first screw chuck. As you can see, that was the recess I made with the Forstner bit. And I've got another one from the old CL3 collection, which fits nicely onto the bottom, and the screw thread goes into the hole that was already there. Bit of a coincidence, but it works. So put it on and pop in a couple of screws just to hold it in place. It's at this point I should have left it between centres to glue up overnight, but I was impatient and I was fiddling with it, and about now I inadvertently twisted the glue block off. What a pain. Hey ho, so take it apart again, re-glue it, and this time round I'm going to hold it in place with a little bit of hot melt glue as well. Well, I actually left this overnight just to make absolutely sure, and it's a really strong bond, I must admit. So now take it all apart and reset it with the screw chuck on the other end as I was doing before. So I fixed it on with the other screw chuck and put a couple of screws in it just to hold it in place. So it's now on the screw chuck. I'm going to bring the tailstock up to make sure that the whole thing is stable, just in case that glue block is a bit iffy, and I'm going to leave that on as long as I can. So I've just started to take some material out with a 3/8 inch bowl gouge. It's pretty gnarly old wood, really hard. So I just wanted to get as much out as I could do while still leaving the cone in there supporting the tailstock. So I've now taken the tailstock away. The glue block has proved to be really robust. So I'm just going to turn out that cone in the middle and then get on with shaping the bowl inside in the normal manner. This laburnum's really hard. It's taking its toll on the tool. Still, carry on, take out that centre area and then shape and profile the rest of the bowl. The 3/8 bowl gouge has been ground with about a 45 to 50 degree bevel, and I was finding it really wasn't quite getting around the base of that inside. So I've swapped to my trusty 1/2 inch bowl gouge with a parabolic flute, and it's got about a 60 degree grind on the nose of the bevel, which makes it a lot easier to get around the corner. At this point you do need to actually move the tool handle quite a way over towards the back of the lathe, so that when you first start the cut you're rubbing the bevel on the profile of the inside of the bowl so you get a smooth cut. Quite a lot of work still needed on this bowl because it's really hard. Ordinarily I'd probably rotate the headstock to make it easier to get my body into the tool, but this time for the filming purposes I didn't. So I've just adjusted the camera angle to make sure that I can actually lean into the tool. To make sure the cut is safe and under control, you do need to use your body to steady the tool handle, rather than having your hands way out behind the lathe without any support. It's your body that needs to control it, not your arms. So I've got a good finish with the bowl gouge. I'm just going to use the Simon Hope scraper system to get some nice finishing cuts on the inside. By putting a fresh burr on the scraper and turning the speed up to 15 or 1800 RPM, I'm able to get some really nice fine shavings, which are an excellent finishing cut on the inside of that bowl. So I'm just going to swap now to the other Simon Hope scraper, which has got a gentler radius on the bottom. Just putting a fresh burr on it with the diamond hone so that it really does produce some nice shavings as opposed to just scraping away at the bottom. This just needed a couple of quick passes across the bottom just to smooth out the flat bit right at the bottom of the bowl. Ready for sanding, sealing and finishing off. It's always difficult with a natural edged bowl to get a perfect finish on the wings because you're being cutting and sanding hit and miss. So a little bit of localised work is usually necessary just to get rid of those little bits of plucked grain that you can get no matter how careful you are with the gouge. After it's been sanded up through the grits, time to put some sanding sealer on. There are a few cracks on the inside that will need a bit of super glue. So before you do that, just like we did on the outside, put the sanding sealer on and then do a little bit of work with super glue and sawdust as necessary. As it turned out, the cracks were quite easy to fill, so did that, sanded it back again, and then a bit more sanding sealer, and now the Yorkshire grit stage just to sort of buff that up inside and outside, and then some Hampshire sheen to finish off the inside. The inside finished and polished, we now need to remove the hot melt glue, which pops off quite easily. With the hot melt glue off, I thought I'd just check whether the paper glue was going to be able to be split with a quick thump. No, it's well and truly glued. So using a thin parting tool, I'm just cutting down at the glue line. I'm taking the wood off the waste block, not off the actual bowl. After cutting down about 10mm or so, I thought I'd give it a go to see if it would come apart, and with a bit of a pull, the paper glue joint parted away, which was great, just what I wanted. So now we just need to clean up the bottom. I thought I'd put it into a jam chuck and dress the bottom as much as I could do. But before I did that, I thought I'd tidy up the previous waste block ready for reuse. So with that tidied away, I've now got the screw chuck faceplate so I can mount the jam chuck friction drive on it. This is one I've previously used before in a chuck, but I've got a hole down the middle and it will work well here. So it's got neoprene wetsuit material on the face and it's been profiled so that it's got a nice smooth radius on the face so it won't dig into the wood. Now at this point I realised that I'd managed to lose the centre mark on the bottom of the bowl, so I needed to find that again using my centre finder in order to be able to mount it between centres. With the centre mark duly found, I wanted to ensure that the friction drive jam chuck didn't spin, as I've had it happen before, and burn the inside of the the bowl, as that is now finished. So I'll just use some paper towel as a buffer just in case it slipped. So with the tailstock brought up into the centre pit mark, I could now just use a 3/8 spindle gouge and just clean up the bottom as much as I could, leaving a little pip that would have to be removed later on by sanding or by a chisel. So there it is, removed from the friction drive jam chuck. You can see the little pip in the middle. Bit of cleaning up needed to be done on the outside, bit of hand sanding because there's some glue staining on there, but otherwise nearly done. So remove that with the chisel, then a little bit of additional sanding, and then sanding sealer again because that's all been removed. And then a quick burnish on the buffing wheel system. Used a bit of aluminium oxide, the middle wheel first, just to remove some of the blemishes in the bark, and then finished it off with the canuba on the final buffing wheel. The outside came up with a lovely shine using the canuba, so I've put the small round mop head on, and I'm going to do the inside to give that a bit of extra gleam. So there we have it, a small bowl turned without the use of a chuck. Bit more fiddly to do than using a chuck system, but still easy to do, and good practice using jam chucks and friction drives.